Season 3, Episode 6, Cha-Cha-Cha, Thrill Rides. Trajce regales the story of the octopus ride at the amusement park. Its carriage uncoupled from the main support arm and central structure and slid down side show alley. "What?" exclaimed Sara. "A guilty plea? Mea culpa," says Trajce. The team challenged the idea of the foreseeable risks of excitable children at amusement parks. Alan reveals details of the 2016 Dreamworld Thunder River Rapids ride. Sara describes the human factors demands on ride operators revealed by the investigations. She explains that during times of stress, recall diminishes and our attentional focus can narrow. The team acknowledge the work of the inspectors that must be confronted by these scenarios and the level of nuanced skill and sensitivity required of their investigations. Sara argues her case, again, for the work design strategist as a C-suite executive level to provide an integrated whole-of-business approach to good work design. And a caution to our listeners, this episode contains references to fatalities.
Yeah, willing and able. DJ Code Red, Saber. We're gonna get this started. Yeah, this is how we starting it. Let's get started, 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 let's get started. Who's gonna start this? We're gonna start this.
Hello and welcome to the Why Work podcast series. You are listening to Trace Vitkovsky, Sara Bazell and Alan Girl. I want to talk about theme parks and the risk associated with having the best day of your life at a theme park. I'm reflecting on a few of the matters that I've done, how some of the risks could have easily have been engineered out. I remember a matter in Mackay, there was a wobbly slides that you go down, so you climb up the stairs.
I did this even at, you remember the in Sydney. Have you done that?
I love those things, but yeah, you always have them at school fairs and at school fetes. Luna Park.
Yeah, they still have like the one from, I don't know, 1920s, 1930s. Timber. My son and I just did this last month.
No, but these are the aluminium ones. You know the ones I'm talking about.
I do. I know exactly.
And the Hessian sack, same
Get
kind
the
of
Hessian
thing.
sack, you're on it.
I'm on the original. I'm on the timber gorgeous ones, right?
You get splinters. So,
I don't think I got them a sack. Yeah.
You get splinters. But anyway, look, I
Hessian
digress.
sack,
So
okay.
I remember this one. It was a no further incident. So NFI or NFA, no further action, no further incident. So we didn't take it to prosecution. But I do remember this one, and I often think about it because, of course, with our kids' primary school, I was the WHS coordinator, of course, making sure we had little highlighted plastic bits on all the spikes and no one tripped on pegs, the usual. But I always used to keep an eye out on the big slide because what happened in Mackay quite a few years ago was, yes, it was to standard. It was what they didn't factor was human factors, and that was the excitement of kiddies having a go and then running up the stairs, sometimes pushing other kids out the way. You know, the grade 7s would nudge the grade 3s, as you do. It's a pecking order, and up they go, getting to the top. Now, the facts of this case were quite simple. Nobody was controlling the excitement of these children running up to the stairs. And there was this poor little boy, I think he was possibly grade 1 or 2, he's a little fella. And as he's trying to make his way up with his Hessian bag, but of course these other kids would nudge him. And as they're nudging him, he was getting squished closer to the side of the railing, because obviously this thing has been designed to ensure people don't fall over. But the guard didn't go all the way to the bottom of the stairs. There was about a 30 or maybe 40 centimetre gap.
That's all it takes.
And as this little boy was being pushed closer and closer to the rung, so it was sort of being, I'm not going to say it was like a Spanish bull running incident, but it could have felt like this for this poor child, because as these bigger kids were pushing him out the way, he slid under. He slid under and fell. Now, luckily, it was a little bit sort of at the lower height, but it could have been possibly above 2 metres, so technically high-risk work activity. But my point is there was guarding.
It's interesting, isn't it? If it was scaffolding, there would be a lot more protection.
Yes, and because this was a ride, and no one foresaw the likelihood of excitable children nudging a smaller child to the point where he was jammed against that and sort of slid along with his Hessian bag under the railing and fell down. So it was just, for me, that was my very first ride prosecution.
Both excitement and stress can narrow our attentional focus, where you lose almost like thinking about losing your peripheral vision and you're just on
But
target.
that was a simple fix. All you would have had was a supervisor go, "Oi, orderly, one line, stop, he goes next." But they didn't have that.
That's what Sydney was like. It was slow, and we were annoyed about having to slow down, but I understood that there were safety implications.
So I've done a bit of work for inflatable devices.
Yes.
And the risk management often is a mixture of engineered solutions and human control. And it's the human control, particularly with excited children. If that falls away, then the children will just become more and more adventurous in their behaviour.
Well, indeed.
Pushing boundaries.
Well, this is a good boundary pusher. Another prosecutor, this was at the Southport show. I didn't do this one, but a colleague did. This was a classic. The ride was the cha-cha-cha.
Cha-cha-cha.
I think it was the cha-cha-cha.
That's sounding like WA.
Or was it could have been the Sizzler. The Sizzler or the cha-cha-cha. But anyway.
Cha-cha-cha is a great restaurant.
It was past tense. I think it's gone.
No.
Sizzler used to exist.
Sizzler was a great restaurant too.
Chain.
True. Except it wasn't there a poisoning incident? Anyway, that's another story.
I have no idea.
But the thing is, okay, this was a ride situation in terms of engineering. Tick all the boxes. There was nothing wrong with this high risk item of plant. What was wrong was the very persistent, precocious child who begged the ride supervisor to let her on, but she was below height.
Oh no! Tell me.
And she wore this fellow down by saying, "Come on, you know who I am. You know it's my dad." And eventually, this fellow let her on the ride.
No, tell me.
She slid out and sustained significant injuries.
This is one where the girl was thrown.
There's been a couple, but this was a while ago. It's about 20 years ago now.
Oh, okay.
Alan? Yeah.
Okay.
So they went to trial and they were found guilty because they thought, no, we're going to contest this. But my point to this is, it's just an example of what you said, Alan, about that mix of human interaction.
Yes.
So that you just reminded me of another one. Again, human, no supervision. This one, supervision was worn down and eroded. But I remember doing the octopus ride.
Oh, I know the octopus where you spin around.
The arms would oscillate up and down up to about 5.5 metres.
Yeah.
And you're spinning. And what happened with that one was, though, but that was definitely a maintenance issue. The bolts sheared. But luckily for everyone, as the ride was coming down, that's when the green car number 2 broke. And it sort of slid down Socho Alley.
Is that the same business as the one in the Northern Territory that's just been convicted and fined?
No, it's a different business.
It slid down Sideshow Alley.
And luckily,
it seriously did. That's like out of a movie. Are you serious?
I did the case. And the thing was, luckily, it was 10 a.m. and nobody was, shooting
around
ducks on Sideshow Alley or whatever they do, or ping pong balls or in clowns.
Yeah.
Luckily, but the biggest takeaway was, fortunately, unlike these other disasters we've heard, the 2 patrons walked out with, I think from the top of my head, a little band-aid on the eyebrow.
How lucky was that?
No injuries,
Oh,
nothing.
Goodness, what a ride. Now people are signing up for that experience, right?
And that was a guilty plea, obviously, mea culpa, put your hands up. But it just shows you that these things are fun activities, but they are high-risk item of planes. It's working at height. If you're at the top and you're going down, gravity will probably dictate you'll injure yourself.
Now, you're talking about that little child, that slipped through. And I remember going to Disneyland with some friends, and a girlfriend talked us into going into the Twilight Zone ride. And I just thought, oh, okay. I thought it was going to be like a bit of a haunted house. I think my son must have been about age 6 at the time, give or take. And we waited and went with the long line and got in there. And at first it seems really tame, and you buckle up and you're in this aisle of people. And then you realize you're going up and hearing a little story. And we thought, oh, okay, this is interesting. The Twilight Zone story, the classic story of like not quite haunted but unique. How would you describe the Twilight Zone? Classic, black and white TV show with weird things that can happen in life, unexplained social phenomenon that Trajce likes to know about, with a hint of being haunted.
Go on.
I'm thinking the Eiffel Tower.
It felt like the Eiffel Tower because we get to the top and then suddenly it's a drop, right? A big drop down, and we drop down, then we go up, and then we drop longer, fall faster. And I'm looking at Jet, and because he's so little, he's out of his seat. He's flying in the air. He hasn't got enough body weight to hold him down. So he does have his seatbelt buckled in, but there's air the whole way until he hits the bottom. But my girlfriend just said, "Oh, come on, this." We were like, "Oh, okay."
Your poor son, he suddenly gets beaten up.
So he's doing wakeboarding, rugby.
Look at the adventure. Look at the adventure.
Wakeboard riding, rugby.
Every recording session, there's a new injury.
There's a new event. Sports, for the love of sport, right? Back to those episodes.
It's amazing. So,
all right, so we have a family that goes on Dreamworld, Thunder River Rapids Ride, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Alan, you and I've had shared many conversations about this, and in fact, Trajce, I think you and I were talking about it because we were preparing to teach some of the students here at ACU.
Human factors, which we've embedded that in there. I don't put it in the law course, but it certainly fits in the design.
We've talked about it in human factors and ergonomics, human-centered design, some of the considerations.
But before we talk about that, because that one is really worth revisiting, because, Alan, tell me a bit about the Northern Territory matter recently. I know we talked about that the other day.
Well, first of all, let me say there's a lot of government inspectors that listen to this podcast, and I just want to applaud them for the work they do. And this case is a good example of that. The octopus ride again, up in the Northern Territory.
Not down Sideshow Alley, okay.
Not down Sideshow Alley, but the inspectors went out so this is Northern Territory inspectors, and they identified that the machine was not being properly maintained. They went out again sometime later and discovered that the machine was still not being properly maintained.
This is very similar to the facts I did.
Yeah, and that resulted in prosecution and fine. Not a particularly large fine, but I think it's really important in that if inspectors identify that something is going wrong, they have to follow up and make sure that whatever it is that was wrong is being fixed.
Do you remember in 2007, the oldest ride in Queensland, which is?
What is it?
The merry-go-round.
Oh, the merry-go-round. Okay,
do you remember there was a certain inspector, and it made front page Courier Mail because it was on the exhibition holiday. There was a threat of closing it down because, now fair enough, because he observed that the moving items of plant were not...
What, guarded?
Guarded.
And so sitting on the little horsey, the unicorn and whatnot, the zebra,
but isn't that interesting?
The seahorse...
But how you've spun that, it's, the little horsey. And that's exactly how the media took it to go, how dare the government do this? But ultimately, you know what it was? Yeah, you know what it was? The little unicorn. I like the unicorn.
The deer and the otter.
But you know what? After all of that, all the fanfare, it is an old, high-risk moving item of plant that has not been guarded.
Guarded and maintained.
Come on.
Yeah,
it may be maintained, but it wasn't guarded.
You can fall off those things, right?
But what struck me was everyone was hooking into this. When I say everyone, the media and the whole sort of cultural aspect was, how dare, no way, it's an icon, you can't shut this down.
The emotional attachment to this, right? The emotional attachment to something iconic.
But you know what?
Isn't that interesting?
It wasn't guarded.
We accept risk if we have an emotional attachment to something.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to go on a once-in-a-lifetime tour to see a volcano.
As you did.
There's that emotional... Well, I didn't know I was going to the volcano, but people who were... I was like, okay, I'm in a helicopter now, I can't turn back.
You talked before about, in New Zealand, going up on the glaciers, and of course the best way to do that is in a helicopter. Yeah. But even that is dangerous. You don't know what's beneath the snow.
Correct. But the point was it was fun and exciting, just like going on a merry-go-round.
I went on a bungee jump.
Bungee jump.
I told you about that story.
Yeah, you did.
The Noong Song Sam jump, right?
And so, but the moment it becomes contextually, it's not work, it's fun. Somehow all of these duties
context,
are not like...
So the
moment you strip away the
technical systems around the context here.
Yeah, because that's the challenge.
It might be fun for the consumer, but for the business that's running the ride or the tourist venture, it's work.
And there's still... And what about this trauma of being involved in that work system when something goes awry? And there is serious trauma.
I guess what I'm suggesting is I think that level of, if you like, the nexus or compatibility, with these two constructs, it's not being made or it's not being... Well, no, it's not being made well, full stop, because we keep talking about deaths, multiple deaths, And yet we devote so much time to making sure the construction industry is doing everything possibly, the manufacturing sector. Well,
we've been bringing up entertainment industry.
Yeah,
We've been talking about TV and sport and now rides.
And I do believe it is a sociological factor. It's like, well, it's
brothels,
fun.
Entertainment again. Okay, we've been talking about everything entertaining.
But there's risk. So reality TV, but my point is, it's still work.
Have you just taken us from high-risk rides to brothels?
I have.
So you know what? I wanted to have one episode. Just one episode.
Yeah, my mind goes to sex. There we go again.
Oh,
but I'm just talking, and sport. I brought in sport. Don't forget I said sport and mafia and whatever. But we're just talking about the context, and something seems like a thrill or entertainment, whatever context.
We forget.
Different applications, different rules seem to apply, right?
And we forget, Alan, what you said. So to the person running that business, or it's the tour guide or owning that ride, it's work.
Yes.
But somehow there's this disconnect, and that's what I'm trying to tease out in this episode. And there shouldn't be a disconnect. Whether your rock's being rubbled, or whether the tomatoes are being graded, or whether it's a little merry-go-round with a unicorn and a little otter, if there is no guarding around these moving items of plant.
But it's a unicorn.
See?
Yeah,
it's a unicorn. And this is what I wanted to appreciate.
Tell us more about this case you were describing.
The one up in the Northern Territory.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think that it happens a lot. It seems to happen a lot in the...
Northern Territory?
Not the Northern Territory gets its share of
like the
cases.
Wild West of Montana is referred to in the US,
have you watched Wolf Creek? Let's just say that.
No, I won't. But anyway, keep going. Northern Territory.
We're going to talk about Americans not watching
What does that have to do with work?
Well, what I want to say is, we're going to...
Backpackers, maybe?
I'm going to unpack maybe this one, the phenomenon of why Americans particularly get really spooked by Wolf Creek. They will not watch it. Anyway, we'll talk about it another time.
Northern Territory, back to Northern Territory, Wild
I think
West.
it doesn't matter whether it's an entertainment ride or a truck. It's got to be properly maintained.
Yes.
And unfortunately, in the entertainment industry, we're seeing a bit, at least in the case law, of rides not being maintained.
Oh, and airplanes. Now, is it just because they're saving money? Is it just purely financial, that it's low budget and and the profit margins aren't significant enough? What is it?
Well, we can't say they're carnies, therefore they don't understand, because the law, you're all equal before the law.
You always tell me, and when it comes to the pointy end of the law, you're still assessed equally.
You knock on that door. Alan doesn't like it when I say that, but you're equal before the law. And when bang, 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 tap, 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 Section 32.
No.
It's Section
for
32.
anyone listening right now, you've got to see how serious Tracy's face is right now. No, he's like...
Sorry.
He's got the hammer in hand. Oh, my gosh, the mallet.
Right, we are going to talk about Dreamworld.
Who's gonna start this? We're gonna start this. Press play and plug in the
Thunder River Rapids Ride. Tell us about it.
So, a ride is well known by people in Queensland, and it seemed to be...
Around the world,
around the world.
It's a ride we've been on. It may become, it might be named something differently, but it's essentially sitting in a big inner tube down a little mini roller coaster of the water, right?
And
it's
just floating
fun.
along on the water. It wasn't a thrill seeker's ride.
Just at the end, you have a little
little
down,
hump,
and you get splashed, and everybody giggles, right? So it's just kind of this fun.
So it's a family ride. You're in these round
you can take your smallest children on it, in the sense of it's safe.
I've been on it. Have you been on it?
I've been on it. In fact, what we'll do is we'll find out how many listeners have actually been on it.
Who has not been on something like this? Like a little...
It is the entry-level thrill-seeking.
It's not an entry-level ride.
That terror drop, that one.
It's not the Twilight Zone drop that I just described.
But
it's not a corkscrew roller coaster that I've been on,
I don't know whether you know this, Sarah, but it wasn't developed as a concept by engineers and safety designers. It was the sort of thing that was cobbled together. In fact, the very first
That's an interesting point.
Design was on a napkin. So,
but where else does design start, though? No, I won't contest that that's wrong yet. No. So a napkin design is concept design.
There were some real design problems with it.
Okay, so you're saying it wasn't then iterated with strong engineering support?
I'd
have to at Dreamworld.
If you're developing any sort of theme park ride, you really have to think it through on how can this go wrong.
Absolutely.
Now, can we just, for those listeners who may not know, what happened in the Dreamworld?
Yeah.
Well, as far as the physical design was concerned, the water levels dropped, and then that had an impact upon how the plumbing, how the water was being pumped through the ride.
But what actually happened though? Just so anybody around that doesn't know this, right? So they're going down an inner tube.
Horrible.
A family are in an inner tube, a big inner tube, if you will.
So there's a conveyor right at the end, which lifts them up over a little rise, and then brings them down to an area where they can get out of the boats
with water that splashes you, and you can giggle and laugh, right? Yeah. Okay.
And what happened in the Dreamworld case is the boats got caught on the end of that.
The rafts stalled.
The rafts got caught at the end of the conveyor, tipped up.
They jammed and then tipped. Yep.
Yes, jammed and tipped, and the passengers on the rafts went into the water and were trying to think of a nice way to say it, but the injuries suffered by those people that fell out of the ride, it's the worst injuries I've ever seen.
So it was fatal. Oh.
So, Alan, so the raft jackknifed, the other one went over the other one, and essentially people...
tipped out.
Yeah, Jack's at the beginning of the conveyor.
How many people died?
There were 4 people that died. And part of the design, too, depended upon a human being. So there was a young woman at the end of the ride, and there was an emergency stop button, and there were multiple emergency stop buttons, and she was unable to activate that in time to save the riders.
And that's what I was just saying, the trauma for that young person who was just hired on maybe a weekend job, you know? I'm just thinking about most of our children that might have those teenage jobs.
I'm a big believer that when you get a new employee on some sort of machinery which involves an emergency stop, get them to press the stop button, so that they know that the factory won't blow up or
and
the
you've
ride
got to test it out. Again,
destroyed.
I'm into that immersive reality. Test it out. Test scenarios. Is it accessible? Can you think in the moment of stress? Can you make the right decision? Does the system design support the human in making the right decision in stressful situations when it is safety critical?
Even bank tellers in banks, press the button, have the screens go up, see that the place doesn't blow up and there's not enormous damage done.
That's right. Even if it's a mistake, better to be safe, that kind of thing, right?
Well, you need to be able to press the button.
You need access to it.
This is where it's complicated. Getting back to this sociology of danger, the last thing I would presume on anybody's mind, including the PCBU, let alone the worker, let alone the patron, is that there's going to be a critical incident and that everyone will go into panic.
And if you haven't practiced it often enough, it's not habitual. Correct. So when you're in stress, it's very hard to do anything that's novel or unusual. You really need to do something that is automatic.
Yes. So you're seeing it unfold in front of you. Wait a bit, and then you've waited too long. You need to be able to just press the button straight away.
That executive order thinking just erode. So
whereas imagine the training for miners underground or above ground or any miner full stop, they would be, I'm not saying a disaster would be prevented, but at least there would, with the training and the relevant, if you like, methodologies applied to minimising as much harm, they'd be in a better position perhaps to prevent...
Well, you'd hope. But you just mentioned socio-technical kinds of considerations and the social phenomenon. I've told you about being in Usk, Medagorsk and Ritter and underground mining. And culturally, the host... The guy that was assigned to us as a host didn't want me carrying my self-rescuer. And I just came from an induction saying, do not leave your self-rescuer. So I'm tagging along this big, burly Kazakhstani guy saying, no, that needs to be on my person. I will carry for you. And takes it off my person. I'm like, wait. So I'm tagging along, almost like holding onto his ankle. Everywhere he goes, like, I've got to be next to that self-rescuer.
Do you think that would happen in Australia, for example, with our high level?
You can't. No, you can't. We would have just gone through the inductions. But would I actually really know how to use my self-rescuer? Do I really have I practiced
that's my next question.
Do I really know how to use it? And then find those bunkers and safe haven. It's not an easy thing to recall when you're new and novel and a visitor to a site and kind of relying on others to guide and prompt you.
So that's work specifically focused on a person being paid to do dangerous work. Now let's extrapolate that to a good, fun, sunny Queensland. Good
weekend ride. They were visiting, I think, interstate.
Well, one of the things
overseas.
chemical engineers do, which a lot of safety professionals don't do, and I love this concept, fail safe. So chemical engineers think about, if what they're doing fails, will it fail into a safe state?
Yeah, so event mode analysis, that kind of thing, failure events and analysis.
Why aren't we uptaking fail-safe? I love it. But why isn't fail-safe something that's universally
Well, it doesn't
applied?
appear in the legislation, which is a bit of a shame. It would be good if it did.
Because it talks about risk and it talks about probability all the time. I say, hang on, that's not yet your perfect mix of human factors and resilience engineering. How is it going to fail? What are all the credible failure modes, which the mining guys at the Earth Moving Equipment Safety Roundtable do incredibly well, right? And then they look at what are we going to do to mitigate safety critical issues, but also how are we going to prop things to go right? So a fail-safe mode of operation all the time. And then the design process takes into account many different users in the system. So, the person who's in the ride, the young girl who's there with a control box, somebody who has to have an emergency response, we go back and do design philosophy, problem-based design statements from every single person who's in that system and think about an action plan because it is distributed situation awareness. It is a team effort and an equipment or digital and technology effort.
Well, I think the problem with the Work Health and Safety Act and many other pieces of safety legislation, it's all designed about preventing the incident from happening.
Safety
it doesn't
first.
like
Safety
to think,
first.
it doesn't like to think about, well, if the incident happens, how will we fail?
Yeah, that's right. It can happen, even if it's a black swan, as they say, completely unexpected. Although I know Trajce will argue, hang on this volcano, you might expect that this could happen.
I would.
But you've got to have some insight around this. And that's why when in work design...
even with the volcano, wouldn't it have been great if the tourist operators had said, at some stage the volcano is going to explode, at which point...
And you
day or night, even if we're there at nighttime, right?
So how do we fail safe in those circumstances?
That's right. Yeah. Assuming that it could do this, what do we do? That's right.
No, that's not good enough. No, that's not enough. It's good. It's saying...
or don't go there.
Over the past 3 years, there have been X amount of eruptions. They happened at night, but it doesn't mean they won't happen at day. The only strategy we have really is if we can make it to our vessel safely.
Run. No, but even that wasn't adequate.
It wasn't. What I'm saying is, no, I didn't say
but
run.
What's your
you
plan
said run.
B and what's your plan C?
I said if we can make it, if, capital F, capital I, if we can run to the vessel on time. So the likelihood, and they're not going to say this, if it does erupt, is that you might die. That's never going to happen in a tourist brochure, is it? But you know what?
But the other problem
in the
too
fine print it happens.
I mean, you mentioned it earlier today. If you're blinded during the operation, you've got to feel your way to some form of safety. How are you going to do that?
Practiced that, right?
And running, really, quite frankly, you're right. Even if you could run, it's not an option because I've been there. So mine's a lived experience. If you trip and fall and there's lots of rocks, it's almost like it's almost like a science fiction movie. There are things shooting up at you, like the pockets
and
of
neon,
steam.
You described them.
No, the neon was the lava.
Yeah.
But eventually, I've been told...
Steam, heat.
Oh, yes. I've had a flashback. No, I've been told that eventually the island... This is back then. The lake...
But come on, Trajce. 20 years ago, you would have been young and fit. You could run fast.
Like yesterday.
Oh, probably not.
Like yesterday.
Based on my lifestyle, probably not as fit. But the thing is, I was told that eventually the island was going to... split and then will be submersed. The rest of it will be submersed underwater. That's what the acid was doing. It was eroding to the island to split. Now, I knew that back then.
Right.
But you see, that commercial imperative.
Commercialised it. Now, look, okay, so
monetised.
Let's talk about this commercial ride, something that was supposed to be innocuous almost, just kind of a bit of family fun, right? So
Which one?
Dreamworld.
Yep, okay.
Thunder River's Rapid Ride, okay? So I'm going to take something that comes out of the inquest, and we have Professor Penelope Sanderson from the University of Queensland did some excellent human factors analysis. And
she did. It was very good.
So
work.
good, and I'm so glad they commissioned her. And it's worth every human factors and work design strategist practitioner having a look at. And Alan, I remember having this discussion with you years ago, and you said to me, pretty much in most cases, I'm going to advise that we get a human factors analyst to look at things retrospectively. It'd be great if we can plan it in design preemptively, right? Not just prevention through design, but understanding how the design process can be really effective for everybody involved.
So just explain her work to Trajce.
Yeah, so she does human factors
I do know it 'cause
analysis.
it's in the course.
Oh, is it?
It's in the
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
I'll explain it to the
inquest,
listeners.
all the thousands, hundreds of pages. is
explain
in-
this to the
So
listeners.
she identified the number of decisions that had to be made
Yeah.
over a period of time.
All my
and it was
learnings.
scary. It was scary, her findings.
all learnings are embedded
And
in the course. Just a plug for
So you
ACUs online.
It's the best course in Australia.
Best course
Maybe
in the world. Possibly the universe, but all thanks to Sara. And
don't forget Kirsten, who started a lot of the material
That's
too.
right.
Kirsten Way did some great work in this.
we work with
There we
wonderful
go.
people in Kirsten Way.
Who's now at UQ,
That's
so
right.
we got some connections here.
But we don't
All right.
mention the competitors anyway. There we go. All right.
Now,
look.
Professor Penelope Sanderson did some excellent human factors analysis on what it would be like to have to regulate the ride, right? What you have to do to operate this control panel. And she looked at other factors. I think they asked her about 9 main questions about maintenance, et cetera. But just for that control panel operation, right? It says here, I've just pulled this up. It's a 2-person operation, and there are 22 signals to process and tasks to perform if, Ride Express guests and children are present. 17 signals if that's not the case, okay? 21 background or periodic checks of the ride operation engineering status, and there are a total of 38 to 43 signals and checks that must be done. Now let's think about it in context of time, okay? Based on calculations and analysis, and we're assuming even in this that it's almost sequential, not that multiple things are happening all at once, which is more likely, okay? But here's 17 to 22 signals to notice and tasks to perform must be done in and around 35 seconds during holiday periods. Mental processing and shifting attention, right? Let me just make this clear. Or off-season, non-holiday, 17 to 22 signals in 43 seconds. Now, how many things are habitual? How many things are novel? What are you having to pay attention to? How are you having to shift your attention? What happens if you get distracted and look at that little kid who was excited and racing somewhere else and you suddenly lose attention?
But I think if you're relying on habit or muscle memory, then you need to do drills.
You need a lot of drills. So I'm always saying this about first aid and CPR, right? You're supposed to be certified and have this qualification. I just recently did mine. First aid every 3 years, CPR every year. Is that really going to teach me a muscle memory in the heat of the moment? Trajce, you drop dead right now, right in front of me. All right, you drop not dead. Let's hope not. You drop down, and I have to perform CPR. I have to check your circulation, your breathing. Something happens. Okay, am I going to know exactly what to do? And I'll tell you right now, it's a bit of a panic that happens. Okay, so if I were in the workplace and I was trained on this, in that context of work, and I had 5 to 10 minutes of training every second or third day, I'd probably be ready to act.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Safety critical stuff needs a lot of habitual training in small snippets and in different ways of digesting information for the way that people learn. Visual and auditory and practice and immersive and extended reality and test different scenarios.
It needs to be varied, cumulative, also
scenario-based,
sequential as well, perhaps, maybe, or at least progressive, that you'd build on each
complexities,
outcome.
layers of complexity, and that's right. So it almost seems a little silly, some of the regulations we have. Why not have a human factors professional go back and analyze some of these requirements?
If this was just a one-off, if we somehow turned let's say the Dreamworld disaster into this one-off, that we have spent all of this time talking about recreational activities, so it's not a one-off, it's not a blip, it is a serious consideration. There's a pattern.
There's a pattern.
Absolutely. And it's universal. I mean, we're talking about what we know. It's in Australia. And we haven't talked about the holiday collisions or the plane.
We'll get to the stuff that went under the ocean too soon. But essentially, the work design so much is about service design and user experience. And too often, a business is focused on that external customer. And I keep trying to remind businesses with whom I work that your internal customer is vital to the success of performance. Their performance affects the customer experience. They are internal customers. They carry your business. They represent your business. Are we doing enough to design for their positive experiences?
what their heart felt in the heat of the moment.
In the heat of the moment.
These are passionate
telling
things.
me what your heart felt.
Daddy, I want to go on this ride. Mom, I want to go on the...
Yeah.
It's not this...
How are you designing for this girl who was operating that control panel?
Getting back to the engineers and the fail-safe approach, do you think it's because we're more obsessed with the notion of so far as is reasonably practicable, whereas engineers really get wedded to the as low as reasonably practicable, ALAB,
sort of, but I'm also going to say this: most design structural designers aren't necessarily thinking of humans involved in that system.
Oh, that's exactly
and the human
right.
interface really requires another level of specialty. The human factors engineer.
So do we need a third way? Like we teach our students ALAB, the SFARP, the law embeds SFARP. We need...
So say that again. Spell it out.
Oh, so the ALARP, the as low as reasonably practicable, as opposed to...
So far as is reasonably practicable.
And in the legislation, in the Work Health and Safety Act, it's the latter. However, there are obviously discrete pieces of other...
It comes up in Australian standards.
But social, like you said, the social phenomenon, when something hits the headlines or when there's some political sway and something's really needs to influence voting strategy, how much does that hold versus the context of persuasion,
Do we need a third way? Do we need a fusion of the ALARPs and and putting in the mix human...
Safety 3.
Safety
I'm just calling it work design. Good work design, man. Service design, user experience.
This is the time. We now need to put all of these ingredients in.
I'm certain.
Design, I'm certain 3, 2, safety now, safety for...
I think it's far more than safety. I think it's an integration of business strategy, organizational strategy. I'm certain that organizations need work design strategists on that executive C-suite, and they curate the idea of good design and cultivate design partnerships. So there's got to be someone with the relationship, the hub of all of the relationships, whether it's engineering designers, whether it's your instructional designers, whether it's your web designer, your architectural interior designers. Go through the list of all the different user experience and service designers. A role to curate this and to cultivate those partnerships and curate the whole idea of good design so that... And I think human factors and ergonomics professionals are perfect to do this because they will continually consider the humans in those work systems.
Sara, safety, the word, it triggers something.
In me or in anyone?
In you.
In me.
It dials
the rebel in me?
It dials a certain cipher. It causes a certain twitch. And
I think safety is very important. I think safety critical considerations are important. But what I've seen in organizations is it sometimes generates a response of yawn, right?
So you don't dislike it, but you don't love it either.
No. I love safety critical investigations. To me, it's exciting if you link that to really good design. It must be partnered with very good design. If it's rules for rules' sake, I'm a natural rebel.
Alan, is that a fair assessment of my accusation that Sarah's...
My response, what heats me.
I think it was a baited question, really.
Well, you do that all the time to me, so I thought I'd... But seriously, we keep looking at things in silos, like in linear sequences, and if we're not...
That's right. A more integrated approach, a whole of business strategy.
That's what I'm talking about.
And understanding, I think we can learn a lot from safety professionals, and the access to not more than just the law and regulations, but really understanding safety critical events. But it has to be then treated with really good design.
Yeah. What do you reckon, Alan?
It's all very interesting, but there's always going to be cases where people just do remarkable things, like the submarine case.
Let's get started, 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 let's get started. Who's going to start this? We're going to start.
I hope you enjoyed that episode of Why Work. You've been listening to Trajce, Sara and Alan, and if you'd like to know more about some of the things we've talked about today, please subscribe, and we'd be more than happy to provide you with information and other things that may interest you. Please be aware that none of the matters we've talked about today should be construed as legal advice or any other type of advice. We're just here to talk about all things related to work. See you next time.
Microphone tattooed on his arm. To the ladies are smooth and charming, to our enemies cold and disheartening, willing and able, not made.